Amantla. Oh, that's why. Amantla. Amantla. Good morning, comrades. I think we can start with our program. Let me take this opportunity to welcome all of you, our PEC members. I think we also have NEC members on the virtual platform, our NEC members who are on the virtual platform, the PEC, our alliance partners, the leagues, and also our comrades from the MDM structures. And a special word of welcome this morning is to Professor Benyera. Professor, welcome to the Northern Cape. Welcome to this platform of the PEC, the provincial chair, and the rest of the leadership. Let me take this opportunity to welcome all of you, and we hope that we will have maximum participation, even from the virtual platform. So let me call the provincial chairperson to officially welcome and address you. Over to you, provincial chair. Can we give the chair a big hand, comrades?
No, thank you very much, Deputy Chair, and I think you deserve the hand of applause for welcoming all of us. Comrades, I see this program is on a hybrid platform, and we've got quite a whole host of people who have joined us on the virtual platform. I think COVID has taught us lessons that we can do these things much better without wasting fuel and all of that. But joining on the virtual platform also has got its own demands on data. But we see we've got comrades who have joined us on YouTube, who has joined us on Facebook, and who has joined us on all the different virtual platforms that we are making use of. And all of you comrades are very welcome and good morning. And let me take this opportunity to welcome all of you to this exciting program, which is convened by the PEC of the ANC in the Northern Cape. And we've invited Professor Benyera to address us on a very contemporary and topical matter, which is the Ukraine and the Russia war. I'm certain if you open your TV now, it's been on headline news for the past few weeks. And the reason why we convened this platform for us to get a perspective on Russia-Ukraine war is because international relations remains a pillar of the ANC strategic approach. If you look in our strategy and tactic documents, we identify 5 pillars for our strategic approach, and international relations is one of those pillars. As the ANC, we characterize ourselves as an anti-imperialist movement and a disciplined force of the left. We broadly characterize ourselves as a disciplined force of the left, and as well as that we're an anti-imperialist movement. In this regard, progressive internationalism is used as a prism or a lens through which we look at the world. At the heart of progressive internationalism is the call by the Freedom Charter. We say we derive our policy perspective from the Freedom Charter, that there shall be peace and friendship. So international relations by the ANC is used to forge friendships, cooperation, and to work towards peace. Also, progressive internationalism includes the fight against the hypocrisy of the West and also transformation of global governance, which are reforms of the IMF. I'm certain those who spend time to analyze our international relations policy. We've got this fight for the transformation of global governance. We want the transformation of the IMF to contribute to the developmental agenda of the developing world. And also, we fight for the transformation of the World Bank. And the other thing which we've been very much vocal about is the issue of the expansion of the UN Security Council to be representative of the world. Our characterization, therefore, as an anti-imperialist force was brought into close focus with the adoption of, in 2011, of Resolution 1973 by the UN Security Council. I don't know how many of you can still remember Resolution 1973, which was taken by the UN Security Council in 2011. That resolution actually led to the slaughter of Muammar Gaddafi. Adopting this resolution, it authorized the enforcement of a no-fly zone in Libya. This was by a vote of 10 in favor to none against, with 5 abstentions, which was Brazil, China, Germany, India, and the Russian Federation. The Council authorized member states acting nationally or through regional organizations or arrangements to take all necessary measures to protect civilians under threat of attack in Libya, including Benghazi. The support of the ANC of Resolution 1973, which was taken in 2011, the ANC supported that resolution in the UN Security Council, caused a great deal of discussions within the movement because the resolution was sponsored by NATO-affiliated countries to declare and authorize a no-fly zone over Libya. By declaring a no-fly zone over a country, you actually weakens its military capacity to respond to any challenges which the country have by using its airspace. So we supported the adoption of that resolution, and ultimately it led to the slaughter and murder of Muammar Gaddafi. And I can still remember the NEC meeting that took place in 2011. There was a lengthy discussion on this matter. But I just want to characterize the nature of the discussion that took place there. The younger generation said South Africa took a wrong decision to support the resolution, and the older generation generally supported the resolution. And whether we supported or did not support the resolution has got a direct bearing on how we characterize ourselves as an anti-imperialist force and a disciplined force of the left. Would an anti-imperialist force and a disciplined force of the left support a resolution to enforce a no-fly zone over an African country, which actually had disastrous consequences? Up until today, Libya is characterized by a great deal of political instability. So the events which are unfolding globally, they come back to pose challenges on us on how we define and characterize ourselves. And today, comrades, marks 5 weeks into the war of Russia and Ukraine, with thousands of casualties, more than 3 million Ukrainian refugees into neighboring countries, millions more internally displaced, and an untold damage to the country's infrastructure. So when we celebrated the new year of 2022, none of us could have imagined that this time around, concerns about COVID would have been overtaken by concerns about war in Eastern Europe. None of us, when we were celebrating the new year for 2022, none of us could have imagined. All of us were still thinking of COVID, and concerns about COVID have been completely overtaken by what is happening in Eastern Europe. All of this bear a crude testimony that we operate in a VUCA world. VUCA is an acronym used by the United States Army War College following 9/11 terrorist attack in 2001. What VUCA means is just an acronym. V stands for volatile, which is change in the world is rapid and unpredictable in its nature and extent. And the U stands for uncertain, that the present in the world is unclear and the future is very much uncertain. If we look at the Ukraine and Russia and Ukraine war, it's still very much uncertain and extremely unclear, and the future where that war would end, it's extremely uncertain. Nobody knows. And the C stands for complex, that there's many different interconnected factors which come into play with the potential to cause chaos and confusion. And the A stands for ambiguous, that there is lack of clarity or awareness about situations. If there was no lack of clarity and awareness about our situations, we could have known maybe last year that there was going to be such a war. And we did not know. We celebrated the new year, all of us thinking about COVID in 2022. And all of a sudden, now all of us were talking about the war that is taking place in Russia and in Ukraine. It's got a direct implications on a whole host of issues. Fuel prices are on a rise, and they say there's a likelihood of starvation in Southern Africa because Ukraine is one of the biggest exporters of wheat. So it's got a direct implications. Fuel prices, if they go up, food prices are going up, which has got an impact on the disposable income of families. So for today, we have reached quite a captivating topic, which is a perspective on Russia-Ukraine war and its implication on global balance of power and multilateralism. That's the topic for today. That's why we invited Professor Benyera, just to give us a perspective on Russia, Ukraine war, and its implications on global balance of forces. There are basically three operational themes in this topic. Is the Russia-Ukraine war, that's the first theme. We know that both were the two biggest republics in the Union of Soviet Socialist Republic. All of us, when we speak of Russia and Ukraine, these were the two biggest republics. First biggest was Russia, and the second was Ukraine. And the Soviet Union was formed in 1922 by Lenin and finally collapsed in 1991. And the other operational theme is global balance of forces, or global balance of power. The balance of power theory in international relations suggests that states may secure their survival by preventing any one state from gaining enough military and economic power to dominate all others. So the post-World War II, the global balance of power was characterized by bipolar. I'm certain most of you know. We used to speak of a bipolar world when we speak of the global balance of power, post-World War II. And then with the collapse of the Soviet Union, we spoke of the unipolar, which was the United States as the world's superpower. And now we start to speak about multipolarity, that there's an emergence of pillars of power right throughout the world. Regions where power is vested right throughout the world. So when we speak about the global balance of power, those are things that we want to reflect on, and what's the impact and implications of this war on what we say is the emergence of multipolarity. But the other operational theme is multilateralism, which is a process of organizing relations between groups of three or more states. when 3 or more states meet. And then we speak of multilateralism. And we've got the African Union, we've got SADC. All of that, those are features of multilateralism, where more than 3 states cooperate on a number of issues which concerns their interests. And even with the establishment of NATO, the establishment of Warsaw, and those were elements of multilateralism. And today, would normally speak of the UN, we'll speak of the World Trade Organization, AUKUS. AUKUS is just a new one which was established between Australia, United Kingdom, and the United States, which is a security pact. And the aim of that security pact is to contain China. NATO was established to contain Russia. And now there's AUKUS, which is established to contain China. Now we have more than capable individual. We've got here with us today a very capable individual to take us through these operational themes, Professor Everesto Beñera. Let me just give you a brief profile of Professor Everesto Beñera. He's an associate professor of African politics in the Department of Political Sciences at the University of South Africa in Pretoria. Everesto holds a doctorate in African politics from the same university. He has worked and researched in Zimbabwe, South Africa, Namibia, and the Democratic Republic of the Congo. At UNISA, he teaches two undergraduate classes. The first one is Understanding Political Behavior and Participation, which is very relevant for this topic. And the second one is Understanding the State. He researches and publishes on community-based non-state transitional justice, human rights, transitology, and decoloniality. He is the editor of the journal Politia, the Journal of Political Science and Public Administration. He has written 2 books. I saw the 2 books here, isn't it? Yeah, this is one of the books, which is The Fourth Industrial Revolution and the Recolonialization of Africa, Everesto Beñera. And the other one is Reimagining Justice, Human Rights, and Leadership in Africa. And there's some of the books which he edited, Breaking the Colonial Contract, which I want to have. Yeah. So these are some of the books, and Africa in the Fourth Industrial Revolution and Indigenous, Traditional, and Non-State Transitional Justice in Southern Africa. So if you want one of the books, just give me a call, I can arrange for you. So we've got Prof, you are very much welcome to the Northern Cape, and we are very grateful that you've accepted our invitation to come and address us on a very important topic which preoccupies our minds, and it also preoccupies our news, and it's a topical issue that we need to develop an understanding and a broad perspective on. Thank you very much, Prof. So with those few words, let us welcome Professor Beñera to come and address us on this very important topic. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saul. Thank you very much, Dr. Zamani, for the very generous introduction. Thank you very much for the invitation and for the warm welcome. Allow me to open with the words of one of Africa's greatest leaders, Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, who said, as Africa, we do not face east, we do not face forward. Sorry, we neither face east nor west, but we face forward. But before I go there, I have to respond to your very generous remarks by observing 4 things. I was very impressed when you addressed the audience as comrades. So am I correct in assuming that we are all comrades here? Good morning, comrades. What is a comrade? A comrade is one whose thinking, ideological and political thinking, is almost identical to the other in the same organization. So if our organization is the African National Congress, it means comrades in that organization are expected to have the same ideological and political understanding of the same issues. A comrade is one who can be replaced for the other without noticing any difference. So if I replace this comrade and put that comrade, the organization should continue going as if nothing has happened. Are we truly comrades here? Thank you very much for the assurance. Because if we are comrades, we persuade each other. I am not saying we don't have disagreements. Comrades don't kill each other. Comrades persuade each other. So before we call each other comrades and all other very good names, let's be truthful to the ideals of comradeship, which is to see organizational goals from the same perspectives to a point where if a comrade is promoted from one structure to the next, organizational goals are executed seamlessly. Dr. Zamani, allow me to respond to the issue of the organizational name. I am addressing today the African National Congress. It is an honor, it is a pleasure that I am addressing the African National Congress and not the South African National Congress. I still believe in the ideals of an African National Congress. We are wearing very beautiful party regalia, and one of the words that I saw is renewal. Those that have got this, by the way, this is the world's smallest handcuff. You go out of prison in the morning, then you come in the evening. And at times you bring your own food, and the warden is there, she's waiting for you. Some people believe in renewing their vows. As an organization, when we talk about organizational renewal, we must be talking about alternatives to, and not alternatives within. Alternatives within, you are just changing your geographical location, but within the same problematic paradigm. You have not structurally changed. That is an alternative within. It's like taking this bottle, then I close some houseflies inside here. In the morning, they are at the bottom. In the afternoon, they are at the top. This is a change within the same prison. What we require from an organization such as the African National Congress is an alternative to, not an alternative within, but an alternative to. So when you talk about alternatives, make sure that the alternatives are not within the same problem that you are trying to escape from or that you are trying to address. Thank you very much for this opportunity to interact with you. In most cases, I interact with first-year students, I interact with second-year students, but today I have got a very huge honor to be addressing such an important structure on the African continent. I have addressed the comrades, but I must also return the favor to myself. Dr. Zamani was referring to me as a professor. I have been asked by many students and by many people in Africa, what does a professor do? The work of a professor is very simple. I do two things. I simplify complicated things and I complicate simple things every day of my life. That is what I do. If something is very simple, I complicate it. If something is very complicated, I simplify it. And then I get paid. This is what a professor does. The work of a professor is to assist society grasp and solve some of its most pertinent problems. At times when you are in the midst of a problem, you cannot even identify the problem. There are some people that have been asked, why are you sad? I am sad because I'm sad. I'm crying because I'm crying. You become so overwhelmed by your crisis that you need somebody to come and shine a different set of eyes on your problems. I will be reading from this script, and I've got some notes that I put here, so I'll be reading from here, but there is a PowerPoint presentation that will be running concurrently with my presentation. You know the issue of PowerPoint presentations. The other day I had a PowerPoint presentation that had about 150 slides. And at the end of the class, this was at the University of Venda, one of the girls said, Professor, we saw the power but not the point. So I am now very skeptical about these PowerPoints. Because we are in Africa and we are Africans, we love telling stories. And at times, stories help us understand our situation. I want to tell you the story about an owl, that bird there. In Shona, it is called Zizi, Z-I-Z-I. And there is another bird on the right. It is called the fork-tailed drongo. In Shona, it is called Nengure. So, in the bird kingdom, the owl was the ruler, ruthless ruler, dictator. And the power of the owl came from the threat of the horns. Those horns there. Any bird that complains, I will use my horns. Any bird that tries to call me to order, just look at my horns. That is the problem that will befall you. So for many years, those birds in that kingdom were afraid of the owl. Until one day, the fork-tailed drongo decided to embark on a suicide attack by attacking the owl. It plowed into the horns, expecting to meet very hard resistance, only to discover that the owl has no horns, but those are feathers. So in most cases, we could be afraid of something that actually does not exist. I am not saying that America does not have horns. I'm not saying that. But when we are afraid, at times it is worth trying. Because at the end of the day, you may shock yourself and your organization to discover that after all, the owl does not have any horns. For all these years, we have been afraid of a non-existent threat. Let me stop that story there. Dear comrades, my brothers and sisters, where does one begin a narrative? Where do you begin a narrative? He began the narrative of my life as an associate professor of African politics. If you bring my grandmother here, she will tell you a completely different story, but about the same person. If you bring my wife here, she will tell you a completely different story about the same person. If you want to see the complexity of perspectives, just take a soccer ball and put it in a stadium. The coach is seeing a trophy. Vodacom is seeing a lot of advertising opportunity. The taxman is seeing a lot of revenue. The thief is seeing a lot of potential cell phones to steal. Everyone is seeing completely different things, but you are all looking at the same thing. So where do you begin the narrative of this war that we are going to discuss today? Do we begin it in 1922 when the Soviet Union was formed? Or when the Cold War ended? Or did it end? Or when NATO grew its members from 12 members to 30 members? Or we should begin this narrative in 1914 when Russia annexed Crimea or reclaimed Crimea or liberated Crimea? Or we should begin this narrative when the Duma voted to recognize the two want-away provinces of Donetsk and Luhansk? Where one begins a narrative automatically preempts the conclusion that they will arrive at. If you want to talk about Jacob Zuma, then you begin about him when he was building Kandla. You arrive at a different perspective. If you talk about Jacob Zuma when he was running the intelligence of the African National Congress in Mozambique, you arrive at a different conclusion. So what determines where one begins their narrative? Let me put a perspective into perspectives. If I take 4 of you and I put you on this spot, I take a piece of paper, I write that, okay? One comrade will see the number 3. One comrade will see the letter E. One comrade will see a W, and one comrade will see an M. If that inscription is on this piece of paper, and I put it here, and one comrade is here, one comrade is here, one comrade here, and the 4th comrade here, at the same geographical location, looking at the same inscription on the same piece of paper, they are seeing 4 different narratives. One of them is even seeing a number 3. So the one will be saying, no, comrades, this is a number, it's 3. Those ones are saying, no, these are letters of the alphabet. But they are not agreeing on which letter of the alphabet, because one is seeing a W, the other one is seeing an M, and the other one is seeing an E. This is how complex perspectives are. We can never see the same thing in exactly the same eyes, even if we are looking at exactly the same political phenomenon. What is my argument? My argument is that, contrary to common political belief, the Cold War never ended, and that this war or invasion or special operation is the actualization of what can be termed a hybrid war. wars have evolved from the times of Shaka Zulu to the times of Vladimir Putin. What we are witnessing, as I will demonstrate to you today, is what is termed a hybrid war. What evidence do I have to forward my argument to you like that? It's because when the Cold War resulted in the demise of the USSR, one of the agreements was that there is going to be an equal and indivisible security in Europe. Equal and indivisible security in Europe. That never materialized because NATO kept on eating into these former Soviet republics. So this is what gave rise to what I am terming here a hybrid war. And how do you run a hybrid war? Mainly through disrupting and disabling. And those are the fronts on which a hybrid war is fought. Political front, conventional front, irregular front, cyber warfare, media warfare, diplomatic warfare, and something that is called lawfare. This is when you use the law to fight a war. What does President Putin want to extract from this war? The control of the Black Sea. This is a very important geographical position in Europe. Secondly, he wants control of the Dnieper River and those eastern territories. And thirdly, to create a new belt from Odessa up to Belarus. So if you look at the map of, can you go to the map? Yes. If you look at this map, this is the Dnieper River, and this is the Black Sea, and Russia is this side. So this, in my view, is what is going to be the new front between Eastern Europe, Russian-dominated, and Western Europe, NATO-dominated. That river there is going to be the boundary, the Dnieper River or the Dnieper River, if you write it in English. Why does Putin want these goals? Why is he asserting himself in such a way? The first one is to achieve a military and security goal, which is to establish a defensive belt for the Collective Security Treaty Organization. These are the countries that remained after the collapse of the USSR. And there is also an economic objective to the war, which is to control the Black Sea and a very huge industrial complex which is around the Dnieper River. And ideologically, there are still ideals to re-establish Mother Russia as a nationalist identity that continues to grow in Eastern Europe. And strategically, to live a militarily and economically, ideologically, geographically, and strategically weakened Ukraine for NATO to inherit. So NATO is most likely going to reject Ukraine because the Ukraine that Russia is living is not the Ukraine that NATO wanted to inherit. This is why Antony Blinken, speaking yesterday in Jerusalem and also in Palestine, actually said that the view that Ukraine will join NATO is one that is increasingly fading. And when Volodymyr Zelensky addressed those 5 Russian journalists, he also said he is now prepared for a compromise anchored on the promise that Ukraine will not join NATO. So what is happening in Ukraine is a very complicated geopolitical and multilateral set of maneuverings. And how are these happening? There is a concept which is known as misrepresentation. It's a very complex philosophical concept to misrepresent. You can take a solar panel and say, this is green energy. Yet it's not green energy. Because how many children are used to dig those mines in the Congo in order for you to produce one solar panel? That is misrepresentation. There is also another concept called disinformation. To deliberately peddle a set of information that is manipulated in order to give a certain perspective that you want to be portrayed. Then there is something called manipulation. You know, when you manipulate, you can manipulate everything, an experiment. You can even manipulate an interview. I can come to you and say, President Robert Mugabe was one of the greatest leaders in Africa, wasn't he? How can you answer? You have to say yes, because I've already manipulated the question by the way that I framed it. So there is a lot of manipulation that is happening. Then there is something called omission. And if omission, manipulation, disinformation, misrepresentation does not work, then you cancel. Let me tell you a very short story about the father, the daughter, and what I can term a third force. I want to talk about this story in relation to our position as South Africa, because we are neutral in this war. So a story is told in Africa about a father who visited his daughter. And when he arrived at the house, he found a gentleman there. Okay? So you are a father, you just make a turn, you visit your daughter, and you find a gentleman that you don't know in your Mukwenyana's house with your daughter. And then your daughter said, oh, Baba, welcome. This is your son-in-law's friend. They work together. These are comrades in the ANC. So he was here to deliver some parcel because your son-in-law went to a conference in Polokwane or in Mangaung. And then your father said, oh, how are you, my son? And they are talking like that. After a few minutes, the husband arrives. And the daughter says, oh, welcome, sweetie. This is Daddy and his friend. They've just arrived from the village. If you are the father of the daughter, what do you do? Do you remain neutral? Where is Comrade X? And where is he? He's not in. What would you do if you were the father of that daughter? What? And then he arrives, says, no, no, no. These gentlemen have just arrived from the village. They are here to buy some medicine for the cows. What do you do? You smile at your new friend. Doc, what do you do? Somebody said to me, I will say to my son-in-law, me and my friend were just about to leave. And our daughter was just about to accompany us. So we isolate the Mkwenyana, we leave him at home. Then I take my so-called friend and this one to the bus stop. Then I'll speak some language with them there privately. And somebody said to me, no. I do not want to participate in such activities. I will let the cat out of the bag immediately and say, no. Why is the identity of this person changing? Can we close the door? Me and Mkwenyana, can we work on these two? It's not very easy to remain neutral. And at times, neutrality is a strategic position in order for you to achieve your objective. So South Africa can be neutral in order to be strategic in ending the war, because we do not want our friend Russia to continue on this path. But we cannot publicly or otherwise condemn what our friend is doing. After all, both Ukraine and Russia are friends to South Africa, but with varying degrees. We are close to Ukraine, but we are closer to the Russian Federation. If we look at our partnership in BRICS, remember it was a brick, then we brought the S to make them many bricks. We are there in BRICS, so we cannot be saying something contra to what we agreed. Was it in Brazil that the kind of cooperation in BRICS is unlimited? So it means we cannot go against one another publicly when we are in alliance of sorts. So I do not believe that neutrality exists. Even when America is mediating between Palestine and Israel, it's not neutral. Neutrality in international relations is a strategic position. And what we want to do as South Africa is to project ourselves as the peacemakers. We have done it in Burundi. We even mediated in Northern Ireland. So we are compelled by our desire for non-confrontation, for a world without war, to be neutral as a position that allows us to reach out to both Vladimirs. Because if you support one Vladimir and chastise the other Vladimir won't listen to you. So you must remain neutral so that you are accessible to both Vladimirs. It's just a matter of spelling, eh? One is Vladimir and one is Volodymyr. But that shows you how close these people are. They share the same first name. They are both Vladimirs. Mandela started the path that we as South Africa are on today. I think he was addressing an American president who was forcing him to take a position. And President Mandela said, "Your enemies are not my enemies." Forcing another country to take a position against their own will amounts to what can be termed bullying in international relations. You cannot assume that I hate another country simply because you hate it. And you cannot force me as a sovereign nation to hate another country simply because you hate it. That cannot be true. And if the African National Congress announced itself on that position, it did so during the height of the so-called Zimbabwean crisis. There was a gentleman called Lord Guthrie who came to South Africa to see Lindiwe Sisulu and Thabo Mbeki. And the idea of Lord Guthrie, his mission, he was sent by Tony Blair to come and talk to South Africa so that South Africa could support a military intervention in Zimbabwe. Lord Guthrie was the British Chief of Army Staff. He came here to Pretoria to see President Mbeki and Lindiwe Sisulu. Will South Africa stand by us if we militarily intervene in Zimbabwe to effect regime change? And President Mbeki said, for many reasons, but for the simple reason that we don't want. We will not side with you. We will not even entertain the idea that you approached us as a member of SADC, as a neighboring country, to effect regime change next door. And President Mbeki went on and said to Lord Guthrie, what assurances do I have that tomorrow you will not go to Angola so that you remove the regime in South Africa? Remember that story about a gentleman who sweet-talked a lady into divorcing the husband so that the two could be an item. And then the gentleman said, I don't want you anymore because another man can come and sweet-talk you into leaving me again. Tony Blair has refused several times that he contemplated military intervention in Zimbabwe. President Mbeki has reiterated 3 times that I am not lying. I was approached by Lord Guthrie, the highest military ranking officer in the United Kingdom, as the President of the Republic of South Africa, to assist the United Kingdom remove a democratically elected government. The African National Congress refused. Now Tony Blair is saying, I never said that. Those people with televisions heard Joe Biden saying, Vladimir Putin must not be allowed to continue ruling Russia. Those 9 words, he said them. Now they are spinning it now. They are spinning it around now. They are saying, no, no, no. As America, we do not believe in regime change. What the president was saying was that it is up to the Russian people if they want President Putin to continue ruling Russia. But that's not what he said. That is not what he said. You see, these are some of the challenges that you have when the president is a mature president. There are a lot of stories about President Joe Biden, and these are coming from Donald Trump's camp. And by the way, Donald Trump calls him Sleepy Joe because he looks sleepy and young. So the story is that President Biden one day got lost going to his office and he ended up in the woods. And this is the person who is running the United States of America. This is not my story. It's not my story. I disown that story. So when you celebrate the demise of your neighbor, Libya, DRC, or Egypt, you are actually preparing for your own demise. Let me pause here and share a very short story with you. There was this farm, and there is something that the boys make in the village. It's a stone that is used to trap the mice. Those that grew up in the villages know about that stone. So you set the stone like this. Then you put some ground nuts or something here, so that as the mice is coming, it is trapped. And then you've got something to eat your pap with. That thing is called riva, R-I-V-A. And what happened was that that structure was set. Okay. I wanted to remove it. Okay. That structure was set on a certain farm. And instead of trapping the mice, it trapped a snake. But before it trapped a snake, the mice saw that danger and it said, I am in great danger here. And it went to the chicken. Dear chicken, there is a stone that has been set there to kill me. Please, can you trip that stone so that it can fall and the danger can be averted? Then the chicken said, no, 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 that's none of my problem. That stone there is set for you little guys. That stone is for the mice. It's not for us chickens. Please move on with your problem. Then the mice went on to the goat. Dear goat, please help me. There is a stone that has been set there to trap me and kill me. Would you just be kind enough to trip that stone so that the danger can be averted? The goat said, no, it's none of my problem. Really, even my kid, even a new goat kid, cannot be threatened by that stone. And the mice went to the cow, and the feedback was the same. So it happened that the stone then trapped a snake. And the farmer's wife was cleaning the yard. She lifted the stone. She was bitten by the snake. A few days later, she died. And the farmer was very sad. And he said to the workers on the farm, please kill the chicken. People are coming for the funeral. The chicken was killed. It was eaten together with mautwane. And more people came for the funeral. And the farmer said, please look for the goat and kill it. We must feed these people. And the goat was killed. On the day of the burial, there were so many people, such that the cow also had to be killed. Needless to say that it is the mice that survived on that farm. So what appears to be none of your problem is actually one of your greatest problems. When you see somebody being subjected to racism, by the way, I was asked by one of my doctoral students, Professor Benyera, you talk about racism and white people and black people, but there are white people that are very good and there are black people that are very bad. How do you explain that? And I said to my student, which is something that can help us as an organization, because with people like Joe Slovo, very good people, racism is not skin pigmentation. Whiteness is not skin pigmentation. It is an ideology. A white person does not necessarily have a white skin because whiteness is a political ideology. A black person does not necessarily have a black skin because blackness is a lived experience. So you could have a white skin, but you are living in Khalichiwe there. You are surrounded by blackness. So when we talk about black people and white people, we are not referring to the pigmentation of the skin. That is a very lazy analysis of a very complex phenomenon. Whiteness is a political ideology, while blackness is a lived experience. I hope I've answered in an asked question, because that is also what professors do. They ask questions, they respond to questions that are not asked. South Africa is strategically neutral, but our neutrality is informed by our reality. And our reality is a product of our history. This is why I told you that short story about the mice, the chicken, the cow, and the goat. That is exactly the philosophy that informs this neutrality that South Africa always talks about when there is a crisis on the continent or elsewhere. Other analysts will call it quiet diplomacy. They prefer to call it quiet diplomacy. But again, it is exactly the same thing. That we experienced apartheid, and we do not want anybody to experience that pain. Instead of facing east or west, we face forward. That there are always two sides to a conflict is not true. There is a third side to a conflict, that there must be no conflict, that there must be negotiation, that we must sit down, and there must be compromises. I wish there was a blackboard. I was going to write the word compromise. The word compromise is a very painful word. Why do I say that? In order for this country to be where it is, there were a lot of compromises. Imagine if you were an MK cadre, you were in Zambia fighting. Then word comes that the war ended yesterday. We are all boarding the plane tomorrow. We are going back to South Africa. Azania will not be pursued anymore. We are going back to South Africa. We have compromised. When you come back to South Africa, remember, as a black person, you come back with your disadvantages. You still don't have money. You are still not educated. You still don't have land. You still don't have dignity. The structure, the system that you were fighting to overthrow still exists. The white person that you were fighting yesterday, that supremacist, is now in the same army with you. You are now wearing the same uniform, but he is now your commander. The person that you were hunting yesterday, you are taking orders from him today. He has his house in Kempton Park. He has his farm in Amanzimtot. So this is the line. As a black person, I am crossing with all my disadvantages, with all my pain, with all my history, all my disappeared cousins and everything. I'm coming into the new dawn with nothing but pain. And the other people are coming with their white privilege. They are coming with whiteness. They walk into a bank. They are looked at differently. So this is why I say, if we had time, we could talk about the idea of compromise as a sore point in South Africa's history. To a point where those that were the most belligerent among us, like Eugene de Kock, went to their grave with some of the most useful secrets that South Africa could have benefited from a healing and nation building perspective. There is another former president who died in Cape Town. What is his name? De Klerk. He also died with a lot of secrets and a lot of things that could have benefited nation building and state building in South Africa. As a result of these compromises, we not only have two states, but many states in one country. When I first came to South Africa as a PhD student, I loved to see South Africa because I'd read so much about it. I read novels. There's a book called Cry the Beloved Country by Alan Patton. So I wanted to see Alex. I was shocked to see how Alexandra and Sandton were next to each other, yet so different. They are so different, colleagues, that if you go to Alex today, there's a road that runs across that town. If you stand in that road, the rats that are in that place, they are so daring, they can climb into your trousers. Big rats, they can eat you. If you don't shake them off, they can come up to your private parts. Big rats, and some of them are white. Big rats in Alexandra. I'm telling you, you see some of the biggest rats in Africa. The cats run away. Yeah, those rats can actually eat the cat. Then you go to Sandton, the richest square mile in Africa. The How train is going there. There's the Radisson Blue there. There's a shopping mall, Coco Chanel. What are those shops? Tell me. All the shops are there. Then we ask ourselves, how do we have a country where this is Brooklyn Mall, one of the premier shopping malls in Africa? This is Diepsloot, where the tissue paper is sold by the sheet. They don't sell you the whole roll of a tissue paper in Diepsloot. They do this, then it's 5 rand. How do we manage to have such a country, comrades? So glaring differences that the N1 ranks as one of the best highways in the world. Just go to Diepsloot. It's worse than most parts in Africa. How come the How train is the best and then there is this other one? I can go on and on and on about schools, about salaries. There are people that are earning 4 million rands. Then on the same payroll, somebody is earning 800 rands. How do such compromises continue to exist in a supposedly democratic dispensation? This is part of our history that then says to us as a nation, our history is so dark, is so painful, that our history continues to be our present. We cannot talk about our history as South Africans because our history is our present. If I go to Khalichiwe there, I will not find many white people. Why? Because the structure of racism remained the same. The structure of racism remained the same. I spoke to you about renewal. I spoke to you about alternatives to and alternatives within. When we push for alternatives, let's make sure that there are real alternatives for our people. I've spoken enough about why we are neutral and why we project ourselves the way we project, and why the spirit of Ubuntu teaches us that the pain that we experienced must never be experienced by any nation ever again. But NATO does not think the same. NATO is on a war path against the Russian Federation because the Russian Federation is challenging the neoliberal status quo. And the Russian Federation is saying, probably these are not wars. Let me try to test them. And what is happening now, here I was demonstrating how we voted as Africa, how Africa is now divided along NATO lines and along the Russian Federation lines. So if you see those green ones, Botswana, Zambia, Malawi, DRC, Seychelles, Comoros, Mauritius, these are the countries that are generally supporting NATO. These are the countries that are condemning Russia. And if you see the countries that are yellow, South Africa, Namibia, Zimbabwe, Burundi, Tanzania, Sudan, South Sudan, Algeria, and Eritrea, these are countries that are supporting the Russian Federation. If you look at this, and by the way, those that were not in the room, they said it is not even worth our efforts to go there and participate. Doc, you spoke about a world war when you made your very generous introductory remarks. Allow me to differ with you. There was never a world war. That was a European war. You see, this issue that when me and you are fighting, then we call it a world war. We are not the world. Europe is not the world. That was the first European war or the second European-American war. I don't remember Malawi participating. It was not a world war. We must erase those lies from our history book. We have never witnessed a world war. Because in a world war, all of us must agree to fight one another. That has never happened, and in my view, that will not happen anytime soon. So that issue of a World War I and a World War II, it's like this guy called Barack Obama. He stood up with the United Nations Council and said, "We, the international community, are very angry." And he was pointing at himself. You are neither international nor are you a community. You are America, you are one country. So there is something called American exceptionalism, where the rules apply to everyone but not to them. The United States has started 10 wars. In Iraq alone, they killed 1 million children. When Madeleine Albright was questioned about the death of so many children in Iraq, she said it was worth it. It was worth it. But when Iran takes one British woman, Nazanin Ratcliffe, the whole world must condemn Iran as an outpost of tyranny. When the Americans bombed people at a wedding in Afghanistan, nobody said, let's ban them from our sports, let's ban them from the banks, let's stop Russia television. So the rules that apply, you can call it double standards, but it's even worse than that. You create rules that do not apply to you, but you apply the same rules to everyone else. The United States of America is not a member of the International Criminal Court, yet it is the one at the forefront of saying dictators must go to the International Criminal Court. Yet it is illegal to take one American to the International Criminal Court. There is even a law in the United States that is called the Anti-International Criminal Court Law that says it is illegal for the International Criminal Court to try a single American for whatever reason. Yet they take a sitting president to the same court. These are not double standards. These are something more than double standards. And I think we need to expose them and continue sharing these narratives so that we are all at the same page. So these are the allies. Russia, and for Ukraine, obviously it is supported by Japan, South Korea, and Australia. And you can see that the strategic map of the world, multilateralism is being redefined. Because on the left, North Korea, Syria, China, Iran, these are countries that one way or the other have been victimized by the West. We can add Venezuela there as well. Yeah. A quick analysis of the power structure. We can see that by far, the Russian Federation is far stronger than Ukraine. However, one of the misinformation that is being put out there, especially by the Western media, is that this is a war of David versus Goliath. This is not David versus Goliath. This is number one versus number two. Because when the USSR broke, these were the two largest republics. So this is not a Ukraine with rudimentary volunteers, people that left their jobs to come and fight. No, they've got one of the most well-trained armies in Eastern Europe. Yep. Okay, I will not speak. This is exactly the position that we are finding ourselves in. Oh, so, you know, there is no country that is an island. Right. Now, you see, when you impose economic sanctions, yes?
I just want to understand about
Thank you very much, Tony. Please just write your question down and then we will address it when the presentation is over. So sanctions are two-way. They are not unidirectional. They flow both ways because you put sanctions on him and then you also need the gas and the oil down there. And next slide, please. No, she's smiling aloud. This is a graphic representation. I try to simplify a very complex war. This is the gas and the sanctions that are being put, the gas sanctions put on Russia by NATO. And they are meant to make Russia very desperate financially, economically. But also, on the other hand, Russia is growing frustrated Because Ukraine is resisting. And the way that Ukraine is resisting is not out of its own ability, but because the war has been transposed. There is what we call transposed warfare, where instead of having Russia versus Ukraine, we have those brigades that were fighting in Syria coming also to fight in Ukraine. And a lot of mercenaries are also coming to fight in Ukraine. And what Russia simply wants, or what Russia wants, demilitarize and neutralize. But this is the most important link. You see, Ukraine is like, I don't want to say a foster child because I would be rude to foster children. NATO does not owe Ukraine anything because Ukraine is not a member of NATO. So the idea that President Zelensky blackmails NATO into saying, just give me 1% of your arms that are gathering dust, amounts to blackmail. He goes to Israel. He revokes the spirit of the Nazi concentration camps. He goes to America via video link. He addresses the American Congress. He revokes the spirit of the Great American War. He goes to Germany. He revokes that spirit. Then he addresses the Japanese. He talks about the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The tactics of Ukraine amounts to blackmailing NATO. And NATO openly said, no membership, and we will not impose a no-fly zone. This is a no-no for NATO. Why doesn't NATO want to impose a no-fly zone? NATO does not want to impose a no-fly zone, but would rather go for this, which for lack of a better word, I termed economic mutually assured destruction. That we would rather run our economies down. The gas that Europe uses, 40% of it comes from Russia. The petrol that Europe uses, 30% of it comes from Russia. Nord Stream, this is a pipeline that was meant to take liquefied natural gas from Russia straight to Germany underneath the Black Sea. Cost millions of euros. Now it has been abandoned for political reasons. Imagine all those businesses that stopped operating in the Russian Federation because of political reasons. Your McDonald's, every Western business stopped operating in the Russian Federation. How much is it to set up a business, to run a business, and you just abandon without any recourse or whatever? This is the crux of the matter. This is why NATO does not want to impose a no-fly zone on Russia, because it would mean a military confrontation between NATO and Russia over Ukrainian skies. And that has got the potential of escalating into a complete Euro-American war. So can you go back to that bomb? This bomb here is called Saturn II. Saturn II is a game changer in international relations, comrades. With this, you can behave the way that you want. Saturn II is the most advanced thing militarily ever to exist on this universe. So it can pack 8 megatons of TNT. 8 megatons. You cannot imagine the amount of explosion, the amount of damage which this missile can cause. But not only that, remember the 2 bombs that were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki by the United States? They were called Little Boy and Fat Man. This bomb here is 400 times stronger than those 2 bombs combined. And this here, this Saturn II, it yields 1.2 million casualties. That is the underestimation of the number of people that one of these can kill. That is 2,000 more powerful than an atomic bomb. Now, this thing has got a lot of advantages, which Pentagon is well aware of. And one of them is that Saturn II can maneuver mid-flight. All other missiles, when launched, they arrive, they detonate. In colloquial language, we say Saturn II can come back home. You can launch it and then tell your enemy that, please surrender, or else it is arriving. Then you can recall it back home. That's how powerful Saturn II is. Now, these are the advantages that Saturn have that are forcing NATO to never agree to imposing a no-fly zone. Remember the face of Vladimir Putin when he said, no country should ever try to stop us from achieving our strategic objective. This is what he was talking about. In terms of power, the brutality of Saturn II is unprecedented. That is all I can say. In terms of technology, there are these things, comrades. They are called multiple independently targetable re-entry vehicles. So it means one Saturn II can carry up to 12 bombs, each going to a different target, each capable of leaving and coming back to the ship, each capable of leaving and coming back home to the launch station. So it's called an MIRV, a multiple independently targetable re-entry vehicle. So one can go to Kyiv, one can go to Mariupol, one can go to Warsaw, but they are launched from one mothership. Then there's something that is called the stealth technology. This is technology developed by the Russians to make a missile that cannot be detected by any radar system or any non-radar missile detection system. So it basically means that Saturn II can be launched, it can strike without it having been detected. In terms of speed, I don't know how to imagine this speed. 24,000 kilometers per hour. That is the speed of that big thing. 7 kilometers per second. 12 times the speed of sound. I was joking with one of my colleagues that when you hear it, it means it passed last week. Because it is 12 times the speed of sound. It's long gone when you hear it. Now, if you look at the circumference of the Earth, it's 40,000 kilometers to go around the Earth. And this thing, the range is 18,000 kilometers. It means Saturn II can be launched from Russia and it can reach anywhere in the world. And in terms of precision, each missile can hit its own target with millimeter precision. Not meter precision, not kilometer precision, but millimeter precision. And in terms of capacity, it can take 10 large warheads, 16 smaller warheads, and a combination of warheads and countermeasures. So what it means is that with these 26 arsenals on one Saturn II, 26 targets can be hit at once. For your small towns like Mariupol, you can deploy one of these 16 smaller warheads. For your bigger towns like Kyiv, you can use one of the 10 big warheads. Now, if the Russian Federation is to launch just 2 of these, that's 26 times 2. That's 42 targets with just 2 Saturns. Now, this is very technical, but what it means, these hypersonic boost glide vehicles, is that each of those 26 arsenals can be programmed to travel at a different speed. So one can go faster and one can go slow and one can go slower. It depends on the strategic goal that Russia wants to achieve. global balance of power and geopolitics. What is the purpose of a war? The purpose of a war is not to kill people. The purpose of a war is to redraw a map. Is to redraw a map. Whether you are removing people from Johannesburg to forming Soweto, you are redrawing a map. That is the purpose of a war. And you create new norms, you create new principles. So what is happening is that because of the excommunication of Syria and the redrawing of the East-West ideological line, Syria is being welcomed back. But most importantly, there is an ongoing arms race. The West is busy cracking their heads as to how they will respond to Saturn II. There's something that happened a long time ago. The Americans went to space and they had a pen. And when they were upside down, their pen could not write, okay? Because the ink was being affected by gravity. So what the Americans did is that they came back to Earth and they designed a very complicated pen. It can write in the desert, it can write in water, it can write under very high temperatures, a very expensive pen. When the Russians went into space and were confronted with the same situation where their pens could not write, they simply took a pencil and continued writing. So at times you complicate a situation where an answer is right next to you. So as we speak, the Pentagon is busy, NASA is busy on how they will strategically respond to Saturn II. Let me tell you a very short story about this very educated professor who went camping with his assistant. So when they were camping there, the assistant woke up in the morning around 3 a.m. and he said, Professor, wake up. The professor woke up and the assistant said, Professor, what do you see? And the professor looked up in the sky. Being a very educated person, he started, meteorologically, I see some cumulonimbus clouds. They are moving roughly at 3 kilometers per hour. They are about 7,000 kilometers up. And climatologically, there's going to be rain in the next 17 days. Chronologically, I think it's 2:30 in the morning. And seismologically, I think we are sitting on top of the Mohorovicic discontinuity. And the professor went on and on like an educated professor. After I'd finished, he said, Thomas, what do you see? Thomas said, Professor, our tent has been stolen. This is why you can see the stuff. You are seeing the stars and all the beautiful things there because the tent is gone, you know. So at times being educated is very dangerous. You see unnecessary things. Right now we are seeing the militarization of outer space, especially with the entry into outer space of commercial vehicles like the one that is owned by the gentleman from Pretoria. And most importantly, NATO and the United States have been demonstrated to be very vulnerable. North Korea is beginning to think that the owl does not have any horns. And what Kim Jong-un did was that he then tested his own intercontinental ballistic missile last week. And this intercontinental ballistic missile, which was tested by North Korea, can reach a height of 6,000 kilometers, and it can reach the United States when it is launched from Pyongyang. And we see more improvements from Iran. And now the United States is now beginning to open up to Venezuela because Venezuela's oil is one of the best in the world. It is called the white gold. And they've cut off Russian oil. Now they are trying to approach Venezuela to see if they can talk to the brother leader. But as you know, Nicolas Maduro is another different type of a person. So they are having it very difficult there. Doc, the death of multilateralism. You gave a very good definition of multilateralism. But you see, multilateralism as an institution, as a way of doing things, is based on international law. But the unfortunate thing is that when there is a war, the two things that die first is the truth and international law. I mean, when me and you fight, it means we can't agree. So we cannot talk about multilateralism when international law is collapsing, when international law is selective, when somebody is formulating international law for the rest, but not for themselves. So we are seeing a divided United Nations General Assembly, a divided and dysfunctional United Nations Security Council. Africa is also divided. South Africa is also divided. And I can argue that the African National Congress is divided. There are 3 resolutions that were put forward, one by South Africa, one by the Friends of Ukraine, and one by Russia. Again, we were trying to push for our neutrality. But this just shows the dysfunctionality of multilateralism. And when the United Nations Security Council is divided with 2 veto-wielding members on opposing sides, who is going to police the world? So what we see is a heightening and a different interpretation of what constitutes international law and what is not international law. And I characterize here multilateralism, next slide. Multilateralism is a patient that is in ICU because of the division between the 5 permanent members. Now we have seen the truth. The Security Council is illegitimate. It is divided. It is selfish. And most importantly, the United Nations Security Council is ineffective because it does not ensure peace, but rather it ensures the selfish interest of the members. And what we are going to see is a United Nations Security Council that is being challenged by non-state actors and the escalation of cyber attacks and the use of artificial intelligence. This is what China wants. You know, it wants a divided and weakened NATO. It wants a negotiated end to the conflict, a neutralized Ukraine, greater security for Russia, and a reduced US credibility and influence. And that is the end game, colleagues. I think the end game is very clear. I foresee especially number 8, the collapse of the United Nations Security Council, because they cannot chase away Russia. So it's either they formulate their own Security Council minus Russia, which means the collapse of the current international world order as we know it. Number 4, there is a professionalization of the army. There is the Azov Brigade, the Wagner Group, and our own executive outcomes from Midrand in Johannesburg. They are also now active in the conflict. And I was talking to my family members that are unemployed, that this here, this Azov battalion is offering US $2,000 per day, provided that you survive a day. You provided that you survive a day. There's a proviso there. Next one. And whilst we are focusing on Ukraine and Russia, these are things that are actually increasing in terms of their danger. Arms race, cyber warfare, climate change, increased human movement. I don't like the term migration, because the idea of migration is one that was born in the Masai Mara with the migration of animals looking for water. Human beings don't migrate. It's called human movement. Then there is obviously going to be a global economic recession. And then COVID-19, we have stopped the testing, especially in Europe. We are just welcoming refugees. And then there's going to be an energy crisis, and there is going to be food insecurity. I cannot end this presentation without making a prescription. What then is to be done? These are words of Stalin. I think Article 27 must be amended. This is of the United Nations Charter, so that we remove the Security Council and replace it with a more democratic system where 2/3 of the United Nations member countries are and 2/3 of the world's population are. It can be in different forms, but it must be one that is based on consensus and numbers, not power. Next slide. And then these are the implications for Africa. What is going on in Ukraine will affect the war in Mozambique because of the liquefied natural gas in Cabo Delgado, and also the liquefied natural gas in Sahel. And food aid is going to be reduced because all the food aid that is used by the World Food Program comes from Ukraine and Russia. And the reduced attention that Africa is going to get as a result of America and Europe being busy with their own wars will one way or the other affect us. And for us in South Africa, we are going to suffer from a phenomenon called imported inflation. The cost of living is going to go high, not as a result of the mismanagement by the African National Congress, but because of a war that is happening thousands and thousands of kilometers away. And finally, there is going to be civil unrest in South Africa, because if petrol is going to cost 40 rand a liter, South Africans don't blame Russia, they don't blame Ukraine. They blame the African National Congress because it is the party that is in power. And they will say, 100 rands cannot buy me 2 liters of petrol. So for me, this is where we need to prepare ourselves in terms of strategy. How do we mitigate the imported effects of the war in South Africa? Because we said there is going to be a heightened attention on the liquefied natural gas in Mozambique. It means there is going to be a civil war in Mozambique. When there is a civil war in Mozambique, there is going to be human movement into South Africa. When South Africa is already suffering with a lot of inequality. As a ruling party, how do we address such a crisis that is brewed and manifested abroad, but the impact and the implications are at home? The impact and the implications are such that as a ruling party, we must speak to them and we must address them. Comrades, I think the first part of this journey is to be aware, and then the second part of the journey is to then say, what then do we do? Do we have another slide? Afedile. Allow me to thank you from the bottom of my heart. When I was growing up in the rural areas, in a place called Gokwe, bordering Zambia and Zimbabwe, I was herding cattle there. I had no idea that one day I would set foot in South Africa. I had no idea that one day I would have an opportunity to speak to an audience like this. The closest that I came to South Africa was through a magazine called Bona, B-O-N-A. Yes, it's Bona. They had a section for pen pals. And most of the pen pals were from Bushbuck Ridge for some reason. You know, I'm a 20-year-old man, I'm looking for pen pals who love reading and writing. My favorite song is by Yvonne Chaka Chaka and so forth. That was the closest that I came to South Africa. So when I finished my master's degree, I then got a place to study for my PhD at the University of South Africa. There is a professor there, and interestingly, he was a very active member of the African National Congress. Professor Raymond Sattner. Raymond Sattner, we used to call him the one-eyed Jew because he has one eye. The guy is one of the most intelligent people in Africa. So Raymond Sattner said to me, Evaristo, I want you to come to South Africa to do a PhD. And I said to him, no, thank you very much for the offer. I'm okay here. And then he persuaded me to come to the University of South Africa. And he said to me, we will give you a scholarship of 80,000 rands. I quickly took my calculator, I checked, I put the money to the, what were called the bond notes. This is more than the salary of the president. I was on the bus. There's a bus called Mlauds. Yeah. From Harare, I came to a place called Marabastad. And then I got to Marabastad. I took a taxi to the University of South Africa. And then I saw Professor Sattner. And he enrolled me. And I did my PhD. And to cut a short story long, when I finished my PhD in 2013, I was about to go back home. And then the Dean of the Faculty of Humanities, his name is Professor Mandla Makanya. He said to me, Evaristo, have you considered staying in South Africa and teaching here at the University of South Africa? I said to him, Prof, it's an honor for me to teach at the university, but I don't even have a permit, you know. Actually, within a few days, my permit is expiring. And in the words of one, Hemen Mashaba, I will be an undocumented illegal immigrant. The university assisted me. They got me a permit. They got me a permanent job. And to believe that I now have a car in South Africa and I have a house in South Africa. Imikolo le. And thank you very much, colleagues. You do not know how much your work is the African National Congress. Inspire many people like me across Africa. You may think that you are struggling, yet your effort is inspiring a lot of people. When I go home, the first question that I am asked is about the African National Congress by my colleagues in ZANU-PF. How is the African National Congress doing? With all those challenges that they are facing, how are they managing? And colleagues, I cannot thank you enough. In Swahili, we say asante sana. Thank you.
So thank you very much, Prof, for the presentation. I see Kandi is only joining us now. Chief, you can turn and go back. And I see Tony Man is not here. He was urging to ask a question. So from the floor, let's just identify 2 or 3 names, point of interest, want to engage on some of the issues which have been raised by Prof. We don't have much time. And but thank you very much, Prof, for this insightful presentation. Empowering perspective on the Russia-Ukraine war. And I think we've got a better understanding of the position of South Africa. That there's 2 sides to this story, and we firmly believe as a country that they must be brought together to talk in order for us to end the war. That's the reason we don't want to take sides, because if you take sides, then you annihilate your role to contribute to the process of mediation. Our attitude as South Africa is that this should be a mediation between the 2 countries to end the war, which we think could serve as a permanent solution to the problems which are there in East Europe. I'm partially blind. I can't see who's there at the back. Oh, there's Pastor Des. Okay, we've got Pastor Des there. He wants to make an input. We've got MEC Masco also wants to make an input. And who else? There's Masco and let me see this side. All right, for now we've got the two. A pastor is, normally as a pastor, you should be the icebreaker. Secretary, you don't want to make some reflections? Okay, we'll get our secretary also to make some reflections.
Thank you very much, Chair. Let me start by appreciating the lecture. It was very, very insightful, and it helped me a lot in understanding what is currently happening. Because we see views that is purported by the media, and these views try to channel you into thinking a specific way. So I really, really need to welcome and applaud this lecture. I have one question, Chair. On the slide that was up on the allies of Russia, I saw two of our BRICS countries there, India and China. Where does it put us as South Africa? Thank you.
All right. And then we'll move to Moscow. And after Moscow, we'll get our political commissar, Tony Man. Yeah. Yeah.
No, thank you very much, Committee. All right. No, thank you very much, Chair and Prof. Thank you for the insightful presentation that you have presented to us. And maybe perhaps I'm still grappling with what you have, the questions that you have asked us towards the end. But before that, you said the slides that speak about the death of multilateralism. And then where does it place multipolar as we transform on that, as it died? So where does it place multipolar? And then there may be the relation between that, if we can just be able to, for us to a little bit unpack for that. And the last one is with regards to the International Court. We are going to our National Policy Conference. The last conference, and then even at NASREC, we couldn't even agree around it. We even tweak it, the position of us as African National Congress. And seems as if, as an organization, we're afraid and being bullied about the different perception that is there, the role that South Africa is playing, then around, especially in the continent, because of, since by that time, I think because of the issues of the state capture was in the midst. So whatever position that we wanted to take to get out of the International Court treaty, I think is because of the issues of the cloud of around the state capture. But maybe at some point we will need a lecture around the issue of the International Court. But we said it in passing, that's why I wanted to raise it. Us as the country, South Africa and Africa as a world, for us to remain in the International Court, the value that it adds to us as in Africans, take into consideration that the most powerful countries who are actually perpetuating wars around the world are not members. So is it not the right time for us now, because we're cleansing African National Congress, to take that bold decision to be able to take move away from International Court? Thank you very much, Chair, for that, my contribution.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Can we hear what the Commissar have to say?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Prof. I just want to ask two questions from the professor. These attacks, some view them as a primitive war. It's a military action. It's designed to forestall or to prevent likely the future the future aggressions. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Oh, Commissar. Oh, Commissar. Yeah, that's, can we get the youth league coordinator? Is it the coordinator there?
Yes,
All
Chair.
right. Okay, Comrade Dolopi.
Yeah, no, thank you, Chair. Mine is just to touch on something that Prof, like Chair, I got a light bulb when he mentioned it. As much as it's more about Ukraine and Russia, but where do we position ourselves as Africa? Prof touched on two words. I'm just going to touch on two words, Prof, that you mentioned. Reduced attention. And now, the thing that came to mind was, where do we position ourselves as Africans, even in this, in what is happening now? Because Prof is saying reduced attention as Euro and America will be busy with their own affairs. So we must ask ourselves, as the organization and as Africans, do we really 10 years from now, if there's another Russia-America war or fight, need to discuss aid that we could have given to ourselves with the wealth of minerals that we have in Africa? I asked myself, with the reduced attention, yes, it may seem as if we're going to lose, but I think also as the African National Congress and Africa, it gives us a time to look inward and really ask ourselves, should we for always be dependent, or should we start tapping into our own riches? That was just my submission, Chair. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Coordinator. And who's, oh, the Secretary. Yeah, we can't miss you.
Viva ANC, viva.
Viva.
Thank you very much, Comrade Chair. Probably one, as a point of departure, one just want to explain the deep connection that is there between us and Zambia. It used to be called Northern Rhodesia. In our inaugural meeting, we had the Chief Lewanika of the Barotsi clan, who attended the first gathering of the ANC in 1912. So there's that connection. No surprise that you are here. We used to have an ANC there, an ANC in Zambia. We used to have an ANC and also in Zimbabwe, and in what used to be one area. The point that I want to make, Prof, they say that what provoked this war was the eastward expansion. The question that I want to ask, why the desire from NATO to expand eastwards? What's the desire? Because we are told that it basically triggered the war. I'm sure you won't just expand if there are no good reasons for you to expand in that direction. And the second question, it's about this Minsk agreement that was actually, I think, concluded around either between 2011 to 2014. What does it entail, and what impact did it have in triggering the war that is currently underway? Thank you very much.
You got the opportunity, Commissar. You can't come back twice now. Is there any other hand before we give? They are right there at the back. Is that Iceman? Iceman.
Greetings. I will just make reference to the question that the professor asked. Where
Yes,
does
Iceman.
one begin the narrative? I think we must look back into 1917, the Russian Revolution, and how the empire was overthrown.
Yeah.
So that's the beginning and the point too. And to the argument, what I would like to say that Russia is a conflicted country. When you look at the two subjects that I have, is geography and history. And the president of Russia is speaking about history right now. And it's a special operation that is conducting, which must be condemned. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Iceman. Can we then give the prof. We've got a man here who studied in Russia, Dr. Mula. He can even speak Russian fluently. we must send you there to mediate for us. Hey, Doc, can we send you there to mediate? All right, he can speak Russian fluently. All right, where are those questions?
So can you first take this round, then we can go to the socials?
All right, no, that's fine.
Thank you, colleagues, for the questions, for the compliments, and for the questions. Sorry, I have to constantly adjust the mic because in Zambia they call it presidential height. after President Frederick Chiluba, you know. Pastor, where does this leave BRICS? BRICS is an economic and not military alliance. However, at the end of the day, everything is economic. So Brazil opposed and openly sided with Ukraine. India sided with Russia. South Africa remained neutral. The impact of this war is such that it is even threatening the very existence of hitherto very strong alliances such as BRICS. It is the responsibility of South Africa, again, to glue BRICS together, especially seeing that Russia is on the war front, Brazil is on the right, India is on the left. It is only South Africa that is in the middle. So South Africa must bring these other members together. And it is our responsibility here to champion such a policy position, to say, colleagues, we have got a BRICS bank, we had made such great strides. Our organization, BRICS, is under threat. One is opposing, one is supporting, and one is in the war. Can we come together and find each other? The death of multilateralism and the notion of multipolarism and South Africa's ambivalent position regarding the issue of the International Criminal Court, especially epitomized when Omar al-Bashir was here. I've got a long answer and a short answer, and a very long answer. The short answer is that I wrote an article in 2018. If you Google it, you will find it. It is called, "Is the International Criminal Court Targeting Africa?" Is the International Criminal Court targeting Africa? It's an article that I wrote in 2018. Then this year, I wrote a book titled "On the Failure of the International Criminal Court." On the failure of the International Criminal Court. I struggled to find publishers because most of them were against the idea of me pronouncing right on the cover of the book that the International Criminal Court had failed. Where does this leave South Africa's position? We need to have another meeting to discuss this. Because I'm trying to look for the softer English. It is epistemology that frames ontology. Knowledge frames behavior. And our knowledge of law in South Africa, in Africa, is that which is based on Ubuntu. And for us, law is not something that is delegated to an alien institution, but it is one where your peers judge you. So as the African National Congress, if I am asked to give unsolicited advice, it is that this is a propitious moment to advocate for the reform of the International Criminal Court by making it regionalized. Not to open an office of the International Criminal Court in Nairobi, then another one in Egypt, then another one in Abuja, then another one in Centton. But it is to go to Uganda and say, what are the forms of law that you use among the Runyangore people in Ituri? Then they will tell you that we use Mato Apat. This is the legal system that we use here. Then the International Criminal Court should use the local justice systems applicable in the geography where the atrocities are committed. Am I clear, comrades? There is something that is called epistemic loneliness. This is where you commit a crime. Then you are taken to a court like The Hague. You have never been in Europe. You have never been in Switzerland. They are speaking Latin. You don't even understand what is happening there. Yet you are supposed to be tried. The question is, the people that you wronged in Uganda have got a legal system. You also have got a legal system that you understand. Why not try this person using the legal systems of the victims so that both the victim and the perpetrator can participate and understand what is going on? This idea of taking Western law and using it on African criminals amounts to secondary victimization. The victims, doc, don't even understand what is going on because those lawyers speak a lot of Latin. You guys, you love Latin, eh? And you speak a lot of Latin in court. There is a guy called Dominic Ongwen. He was abducted as a child, 14 years coming from school, by Joseph Kony in Uganda. He was indoctrinated and he was turned into a lethal warlord. Then he surrendered and he was prosecuted at The Hague. I wrote an article which was published on 21 December. And I asked the question, is Dominic Ongwen a victim or a perpetrator? Because this is a boy who was abducted when he was 14 years, coming from school, going home. He was taken to the bushes. He was indoctrinated. And he was made into one of Africa's lethal killers. When he surrendered, he was prosecuted first as a warlord. And the issue that he was abducted, that he never got a chance to grow his own conscience as a child, was not taken into consideration. So, comrade, we need to reform the law so that it is aligned to our lived experiences. Political commissar, we need to have a discussion. Youth League coordinator, Africa's position and the reduced currency of Africa. You know, I always teach my students that the moment that Africans get organized, even 10% organized, Europe will become a third world continent because Africa underwrites Europe. There is nothing there other than coldness. We are behind gone up. They don't have the resources that we have here. So the reduced attention that we are getting, remember we went through under the same dispensation when the Cold War ended. We did not get any attention. And now we are experiencing the same. And this is an opportunity for us as the African National Congress to say to Africa, for how long are we going to depend on the attention of others when they are living on our resources? These discussions start at political party level and then they permeate to state level, not the other way around. So this is an opportunity for us to gather ourselves so that we can benefit from the reduced attention and the reduced international relations currency that we are currently being subjected to. Secretary, I've got a very short story for you. I am lucky that when there was the war in Rhodesia, I was a small boy. When South Africa was fighting this side, I was also fairly mature. We had a South African MK combatant. I think the policy of MK was to second combatants to Zipra. Then they act as if they are Zipra cadres, yet they were MK cadres. And the weapons would come from Zambia into Zimbabwe. Then these fake Zipra cadres would then take those weapons to South Africa. So this MK cadre was living in our village as one of us. When the war ended, he refused to come back home and he is now a Zimbabwean. He is now one of us. He's now old. He's there in the village. Yeah, he's there. So one day when you want, I will take you to him. The eastward expansion of NATO. What exactly does NATO want? The war between Ukraine and Russia can be reduced to one word: ideology, which is the political way of managing people. The West wants capitalism. Russia, China are saying we need an alternative to capitalism. And the Minsk agreement said, as a condition to removing the Berlin Wall, we freeze all borders. The republics become independent. NATO stays where it is with 12 members. Then Russia becomes an independent state. Needless to say that NATO increased its membership from 12 to 30. This is why I said, where do you study the narrative? Because if I was Russia, the day that NATO increased its membership from 12 to 13, I could have started a war. Because they were breaking the agreement that ended the USSR. The fact that the NATO membership grew from 12 to 30 and Russia did nothing about it is actually something that is not being highlighted in the media. So NATO is the aggressor from my perspective because they broke the Minsk agreement and they increased their membership from 12 to 30 to a point where NATO took its resolve to Ukraine, which is a next door neighbor of Russia. So this amounts to an existential threat to Russia. Imagine if Russia had taken the Collective Security Treaty Organization to Mexico, America would not have agreed. So America and NATO, in my view, are the aggressors, the Icemen, and the 1917 revolution as the starting point for the analysis. One can say, why start with the revolution and not with the conditions that gave rise to the revolution? So it's almost like a chicken and egg situation where the narrative that you want to put forward determines where you start your narrative. This is where I will end this round of questions. I will ask the colleagues manning the socials to bring the, oh, where are they? Are they big enough? Okay. While they are looking at that, I will quickly address the issue of the African National Congress. The history that we were taught was that when Africa was colonized, it was a country. And at Fort Hare, nationalists sat and they said, let's liberate the continent. So they had an ideology and they even had an anthem called God Bless Africa, not God Bless South Africa. And it is the same national anthem that was sang in Zimbabwe, in Zambia, in Tanzania, and all over. And that dream, mind you, ZANU-PF traces its origin from the African National Congress. Because when it came to Rhodesia, it became known as the Southern Rhodesia African National Congress. Then it became ZAPU. Then it became ZANU. So this is the link that most of us forget. Most of the political parties, even Chama Pinduzi in Tanzania, they trace their ideological birth to the African National Congress in Bloemfontein. Thank you very much to our online audience. There is an issue. There is a question here from Neba. Let Prof carry the mic to the screen, please. Oh, sorry. My apologies, Neba. I've been defeated by time. Then there is Hastings Nell. Can you please assist the Prof with loosening the mic? We can't hear when he moves around. Oh.
Here's the question, number 5, and this one as well. Yeah, 1, 2.
Thank you very much. There's a priest that was given an opportunity to preach. Yeah. So he went in front, and you know, priests, where's the priest? Is he in? Yeah, the priests have got certain ways of doing their things. So he went in front and he said, repeat after me. You know, these Anglicans, they repeat certain prayers. And then the microphone was not working. And the priest said, this is not working. And the congregation said, when this is not working. So this is exactly what I'm doing here. What are lessons for our African leaders in terms of solidarity, handling our human movement, refugees that are affected by conflicts in their own countries? I think what we need to do is to have, thank you very much for the question, neighbor. When we address the issue of human movement, the issue of refugees, and those people that are affected by conflicts, we need to identify the source of the problem. The problem is not the neighbor's child who's coming to your house. Maybe the whole village is the problem. I teach elsewhere that the problem is the state. When ZANU-PF was fighting for state power, when the ANC was fighting for state power, we were fighting for the wrong thing. Why do I say so? Because the state is a colonial creation. The state was created for a specific reason to manage the colonized people. So somebody comes to your house, creates an instrument to manage you. Then you fight for that instrument so that you manage your family with that instrument. For me, human movement, we need to rethink the model of the state that we are having. Because the model of the state that we have in Africa was imposed on us as part of colonial processes. This is why you see there is Grahamstown, there is King Williamstown, there is Nqebastown, and in Uganda and Kenya, there are borders that are like a straight line. If you go to the border between Kenya and Uganda, there are two people. I wrote about them in this book. The other one is called Agri Awori, and the other one is called Mudi Awori, two brothers. One became the vice president of Kenya. One became the minister for security in Uganda. Their houses are next to each other, either Kenyan and one is a Ugandan. If we go to Mpumalanga, the place where Samora Machel's helicopter crashed, there are three brothers. When colonialism came, one ended up a South African, one a Mozambican, one a Squatter. Three brothers live in three countries, yet they are on the same vicinity. Brothers live in three countries, yet they are on the same vicinity. So when we look at issues of human movement, of chief whip and all the infra, because the chief whip was created by colonialism to make sure that nobody in the parliament goes against the ethos of apartheid. That we must all be in one line regarding our treatment of black people. That is how the chief whip was born. And today we have got a whip. And who is he whipping? Consensus. So if it is consensus, if a comrade is one who can be replaced by the other, why do we need a chief whip? It's an instrument of violence. Just listen to the name, chief whip. It's violence. I was telling somebody that violence takes different forms. One of my favorite soccer players is called Muromo Wandau Eric Matoho. They don't call him that, they call him Eric Matoho, because they are disenfranchising him. So if your name is a Kandi, then Benjamin is your unofficial name, they will call you Ben. They don't want to call you Kandi. That is violence. So when addressing the issue of human movement, irregular human movement, we need to look at the idea of the state and rethink whether we need to inherit an institution which was created to manage and to impoverish us. And then there is also another question from Faku. The AU is very quiet on this matter. Is it responsible continental leadership? The African Union is a disgrace. It's a captured institution. This is why they accepted a headquarters that was donated. When you are a father, how does another man build you a bedroom? How? Our faith is in the political party, because the political party is the one that is in touch with the people. So unless political parties form an organization that parallels that of the African Union, if it is there, I am not aware of it. This is an organization which can actually represent the true views of the African people on the continent. And somebody wrote here, Chief Whip Professor. Oh, he's not just the whip, he's the Chief Whip. So it means the other smaller whips, and he's holding the, yeah. So we need to be aware of what we inherit and how it perpetuates our problems. At the end of the day, we appear as if we are an incompetent organization. Yet we inherited and continue to run problematic organizations. In our caucuses, colleagues, let's encourage each other to rethink the model of the state that can work for post-colonial and post-apartheid South Africa. Thank you.
Viva ANC, viva. Maibuye. Maibuye. Africa. Oh, thank you very much. Basically reciting Maibuye Africa because it was initiated by the ANC, especially around 1952, when we embarked on the Defiance campaign. We even had a sign, this one. That's the initial sign when we lifted our fist up. It was not a balded fist, it was lifted up like this. Because the four fingers represented unity, determination, and resolution to free Africa. And the finger there pointed to your right shoulder, symbolized that Africa must come back. So it's very much important that we need to, whilst commenting on the Russian-Ukraine war, to affirm our full support that Africa must come back to those who live in it, black and white, because that's what we said when we actually embraced the Freedom Charter. We have our meetings every Monday as the provincial officials of the ANC. And in those gatherings, there's no, consensus right from the beginning. We discuss, debate, and differ. You differ with Dogotela, Comrade Zamani, so he would even ask for more comments on what he said, meaning that he creates space for us, even to differ with him there, and allow us to express our views there. No suppression of views at the level of the provincial officials. And what we were saying is that the same spirit that prevails at the level of the provincial officials of the ANC, we must cascade that down to the PWC, but also the PEC. Lively debates happen there. We engage each other and we understand that there can't be consensus right from the word go. The scenario that the professor painted here earlier, the M and the number 3, it's what characterized debates in the PEC of the ANC. And we RECs, but also in branches of the ANC. When we converse politically, we converge and we grow. But when you suppress debate, the ANC will be poorer. So we thought that we want to use today's platform to make the ANC a better ANC. But it should not stop here. We must now take it even to our regions. It's part of our political education. We started at an international platform, but more debates will happen about topical issues that affect the ANC and the lives of our people here in the country. We are the leader of the democratic forces as the ANC, meaning necessarily that we are leading ourselves as the ANC, the leagues of the ANC, the alliance partners, student movements, social movements, society at large, and that's the reason why we are called the leader of the democratic forces. We must live up to that name by ensuring that there's discussion on topical issues that affect the ANC. Because if we don't do that, we'll turn into a dictatorship. We are democratic. In our DNA, we are democratic, and we must always show that through debate and persuasion. That's how we reach good decisions, when we persuade each other on things that affect the lives of our people. We must never stop to debate those issues. So political education, it's a critical element of building this ANC and also taking the renewal project to greater heights. So we'll be having different debates on different issues moving forward, and we want maximum participation of the leadership of the ANC, of the Alliance and MDM formations as we move. There's a new resolution now that's sponsored by the NEC. The one, it's called the Vision 2032. Remember in 2012 when we met, we said that the decade will be a decade to build the cadre. So this is basically the last year of that decade. But now we are saying that now we must build and renew the ANC. Remember when we met in 2017 at Nazareth, we had in our strategy and tactics so many things that we speak about renewal. Even the caption of that of strategy and tactics then says that enhancing organizational integrity and intensifying action towards a national democratic society. We identified so many gaps that are actually affecting our people negatively, or our organization's subjective weaknesses, and we said we won't be able to achieve the desired society of a national democratic society if we don't address the gaps that are, or subjective weaknesses that are affecting our people. So this attempt to bring political education closer to our people is basically to encourage them to address the subjective weaknesses that we experience, and also to try to build the kind of ANC vehicle that we want to have in 2032 that will be able to address the subjective weaknesses that the ANC is experiencing at this level. So let me take this opportunity first and foremost to express our appreciation to our provincial chair for the platform that he created for us to engage politically, but also our appreciation go to the professor, very informative. I think all of us can agree, very incisive. It deals with, the lecture actually dealt with many of the issues that we did not have a very clear understanding. Now with the kind of lecture that we got, our horizons are now broadened. And we are sure, Professor, with the information that you imparted on us, we can use it as a potent tool to engage in more debates out there and to speak with the confidence that you have given us. To ANC PEC members here, thanks again for your participation. But our alliance partners are also here, and we know that you are a reliable force that we can always depend on. Our appreciation also to you. We've invited so many other organizations. Kanti, when he called me this morning and said that I want to participate, but I don't have the blessing of the REC to go there. Can I be your friend? Because you've invited the chair and secretary. I want to be the friend to the provincial secretary there. So you are welcome to attend. You can't keep people out there. The more we actually meet and discuss, the better the organization will become. We then have Zoe. Zoe was not even invited. I want to participate in this debate. By all means, Zoe, you are welcome. We want you to attend so that you can sharpen your political understanding. The leagues of the ANC are here, the Women's League, but also the Youth League. The Veterans League, we said that we don't want them to contract COVID. We know that the older generation, they are a bit susceptible to COVID. So we said that they can rather follow us via social media, but our appreciation also to you. And all other structures that attended. Those on social media, on Zoom, on Facebook, who are following us, our appreciation also to you. Thank you very much, Comrade Chair. To indicate that we've prepared food, please join us for that also. Thank you.